Good afternoon and thank you all of you for joining us for this very, very interesting book talk. Which book you can see up here, India's Pathways to Success, Winning in the Next Decade. And as you can see that people are already starting to buy the book. The book is outside and it's also promised that there's a 10% discount on it. That's what I was told. Well, my name is Neharika Vohra. I'm a faculty here in the organizational behavior area. It is really my privilege to moderate such a panel. I don't know if I would moderate, but to introduce such a panel and a panel full of luminaries. And for me to even introduce them is to kind of showing light to sun. So I would do very little of it and allow the individuals here to speak about the book. I think for every one of us, the question of, please, the fact that India is on a pathway is definitely, is I think an accepted fact, but what should we do to make that hope and dream a reality is a question that many academicians, thinkers, policymakers think about. And I think this book has some interesting insights on it. And the authors present here would love to share some of what their insights are. To start off with, let me introduce Dr. Ganesh Natarajan, who's also the author of the book, who's the editor and the author of the book. Dr. Ganesh Natarajan also doesn't need an introduction. He currently is the executive chairman and founder of 5F World, a platform for digital startup skills, social ventures in the country. He is also the chairman of Honeywell Automation India and Lighthouse Communities Foundation and a central board member of the State Bank of India and Hinduja Global Solutions. I got to work very closely with him in the last 2 years with the Lighthouse project and have seen the energy, seen the authenticity and seen the kind of commitment he brings to his work. So welcome and thank you for coming for here. Dr. Raghunath Mashalkar, who again doesn't need an introduction. He has been a very, very known person on our campus. He's taught courses with Professor Anil Gupta. He has been introduced to us in many ways, including one where one of the startups we were mentoring said Dr. Mashalkar actually carries the pocket EEG in his pocket and shows it to everybody. And to me, that is the kind of spirit he carries for encouraging people and the love that he has for science and innovation. So Dr. Mashalkar is known for his own world-class scientific research, transformative science, innovation institution leadership, pioneering different Indian movements, ranging from traditional knowledge protection to creation of strong yet balanced IPR systems to inclusive innovation movement based on the concept of Gandhian engineering. He has, of course, been an influential thought leader in shaping science, technology, and innovation. And he's also written a full chapter in this book. And like a good student, I read all the chapters, and I have many things that I've marked on your chapter. Dr. Mashalkar has been honored with 3 of the highest civilian awards that an Indian can get, namely the Padma Shri in 91, Padma Bhushan in 2000, and Padma Vibhushan in 2004. So I think it needs a round of applause. Shri Ashank Desai, I don't know why you're named as Shri Ashank Desai, but you are. Also has been somebody one has, at least I have worked with very closely over the last 15 or more years. We were actually together on a committee for future directions that we were part of for IIMA Ahmedabad. And that is when I really got to know you and your commitment to institution building. And Ashank has been the founder, vice chairman, managing director of Mastec Limited. He's also the co-founder and chairman emeritus NASCOM and vice president Asian Oceanian Computing Industry Organization. He has been on the board of IIMA and on the board of several other organizations. Institutions that I'm not going to name, including IIT Bombay. And he has been felicitated by the Prime Minister of India for his contribution to NASSCOM and IT industry over the last 25 years. He also is one of our donors to a leadership center called Ashank Desai Center for Leadership Development. Thank you for that. And thank you for coming in and talking to us about it. And we also have a surprise author here. She has not been on our poster, but very happy to have you, Dr. Uma. Dr. Uma is also an author in this book, one of the chapters she's written, and she is the chairperson Global Talent Track, which is focused, it's an entrepreneurial venture, which is focused on skill development. And they have, in the last 10 years or in the last few years, they have already done the work of skilling 2 million people. And knowing the number of people that we need to skill and the number of unskilled people we have in the country, I think that's a huge achievement. And thank you for the work that you're doing. She has held several leadership responsibilities in industry forums, writes a regular column in the Financial Express on the subjects of digital and skills. And as a co-founder of the GTT Foundation, Uma plays a vital role shaping organizations, multiple programs taken by the GTT Foundation. Also got to know Uma in the last 2 years for the amazing work that she has done, and very happy to welcome you here as well, Dr. Uma. So I guess I should stop talking and allow the authors to speak, which is the most important, which is the highlight of the afternoon today. So Dr. Ganesh, I think I would start off by requesting you to make a beginning.
Sure. Thank you very much, Neharika. And for all of you who know IIMA to know, Ashank was saying, welcome back to IIMA, because she did a sabbatical as the Vice Chancellor of the Delhi Skills and Entrepreneurship University. Our loss is IIMA's gain, because the lighthouse project that she talks about, which is really doing well in Delhi, was really an architect of her thinking in terms of using innovative ideas to make youth in this country employable and employed, which, as we know, is one of the significant problems that we continue to have in the country today, the whole demographic dividend, et cetera, et cetera. So let me give you a background. I'm only here to maybe talk about the book and why the genesis of the book. First of all, let me introduce you to Pune International Center, which is, our president is Dr. Mashelkar. The vice president is Dr. Vijay Kelkar, who also is a Padma Vibhushan and probably one of the best finance secretaries this country has ever known in the IIS. And they started the entity together. Many of us are founding trustees. And Pune International Center, like India International Center or Bangalore, does all the traditional things you would expect. We get thought leaders to come and talk. We do a lot of research papers, etc. But over the last 5 years, many of us involved with the Pune International Center have started writing not just journals, articles, but also books. In fact, Dr. Mashelkar and Ravi Pandit, who's another of our co-authors, wrote this amazing book, which has been a business bookseller all over the country, which was that, when you can pole vault, why leapfrog? And I'm sure Dr. Mashelkar in his STI talk will talk a little bit about that. Then, of course, we have Uma and I actually wrote another book called Digital Success, because everybody's talking digital transformation, but how much success is there and how much should we really be looking at? Dr. Kelkar and another of our co-authors, Ajay Shah, wrote this amazing book called In Service of the Nation, which is really, it's one of the books that you must read, because it talks about how the whole service concept has evolved in this country. And then 2020, if you wind back to 2.5 years ago, one of the biggest things that happened in this country was China came and plunked themselves in Ladakh, as you know. And I remember we actually went to Pangong Lake to just look at the terrain and try to figure how difficult it would have been for our very, very brave army Jawans to literally physically push the Chinese back. And we still don't know exactly what's happening there, but we know that there is a certain amount of peace. Then we got together and said, look, what can we do? I mean, if a big neighbor just comes in and squats on our territory. And I remember this was the peak of COVID. So we all had times. So Dr. Mashelkar, you'll remember that every Sunday we used to get into a 1.5 hour Zoom discussion where the 6 of us who wrote that book became friends and partners for life. That is Dr. Kelkar, Dr. Mashelkar, Ajay Shah, Dr. Ajit Ranade, who's now the Vice Chancellor of the Gokhale Institute, Ambassador Gautam Bambawale, who was the ambassador to Pakistan, China, quite a few other places. So we got together and wrote this book. And the whole premise of that book was that India must combat China, not just militarily, but through the economy, because that was a time when India was 2.9 trillion in GDP and China was already 15 trillion. Okay, so where are we standing up to somebody if we cannot really compete economically and diplomatically and a whole other bunch of areas? That became got the best book of the year award from Scotch Foundation. And it was really exciting for us to look at all the dimensions. So even last week when I was in Philippines and Singapore, we were discussing some ideas of the book. And of course, my Chinese friends told me, hey, you got it all wrong. I know China is a very different entity, so we can believe or not believe as we go along. Okay. Then we wrote this really amazing book, which was facing up to the China challenge, not standing up, not beating China, no aggro stuff, but facing up to the China challenge. And when we wrote that book, a lot of my friends in the IAS and the government and academia and industry said, that's all very well, but aren't we fed up of comparing India with China all the time? Why don't we just write a book on what should India be doing? Which was an interesting idea. So we roped in more authors. So there are actually 13 collaborators to this book. Okay, and if you read the book, you'll find that they're very different, like people like Harshavardhan Singh, who was a Deputy Director General of the WTO, written a full chapter on trade policy. And we've written about the whole need for a better trust economy to evolve. So it's a very interesting kaleidoscope of ideas on what could be the pathways to India's success. So let me take a few minutes to outline what you would see in the book. Okay, the first, of course, as we said, is we looked at the core success areas of India. And if you look at it, clearly, in fact, I was discussing with the chairman of State Bank about 3 months ago, and he had just made a presentation on the future of India. So I actually used 3 or 4 of his slides. If any of you want the slides I was supposed to do, which I decided not to do, just ask the librarian, they can send you the copy of there are some 10 slides I put together, which has a lot of data if you want, if any of you are data oriented. But if you look at the big picture, we're all proud of the fact that we're the 5th largest economy in the world. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman mentioned it in her speech. Without doubt, whether it's 2028 or 2029 or earlier, we will be the 3rd largest economy in terms of GDP in the world. Crossing beyond Japan and Germany is not difficult. But don't forget, there'll still be a huge chasm between the 3rd largest economy and China and the US. So it's not like, we won the war or anything like that. So that is one dimension. The second good thing is, in fact, we wrote about it very, very passionately in our book, that we have to start competing again in manufacturing. We can't say IT services industry will take care of the world, because Ashank and I have been both part of NASSCOM. And today we are proud of the $220 billion industry, but it doesn't employ more than 55 lakh people. And this is a country which needs, as we all know, many, many crores of young people to get jobs. So manufacturing is the only solution. But what the government has done in the recent past, the whole PLI scheme, which you must have heard about, the productivity linked incentives, which started off with a bang with Apple Computer making a big commitment to India. The whole microprocessor semiconductor industry is set to take off with all the MOUs we are signing. Even areas like specialty steels, for instance, is really taking off. The food products of the food processing ecosystem is taking off. And if you look at the PLI scheme, there are at least 14 sectors where we are expecting both champion companies to emerge from India and from abroad. So I think that's good news. Moving to digital India, all of you know about the wonders that UPI has done. This is one country where even my caddy on the golf course says, when I offer him 500 rupees, he says, nahi sir, Google Pay karo. Seriously, I'm not joking. And any chaiwala anywhere in the world will prefer to get a Paytm or a Google Pay payment rather than get cash. The cash economy is almost like going away. The cash economy is still there for other reasons that we won't get into. But the person who was using cash because he knew no other way is now part of this economy. But that's not just Digital India. Digital India, if you look at what my good friend Nandan Nilekani keeps talking about, that was chapter 1. The JAM Trinity, Jandhan, Aadhaar, mobility, and of course, UPI was a product of that. But if you look at the platform economy that's emerging, there'll be platforms for SMEs, there'll be platforms for agriculture, for circular economy or sustainability, whole bunch of things. We're already all excited about something called ONDC, which is the Open Network for Digital Commerce. So all that is beginning to happen. And the $1 trillion Digital India, as we call it, will probably happen faster than India becomes 5 trillion, which is one of our agendas. So these are the great things that are happening. But we then took a microscope and said, what's really happening on the ground? So we naturally looked at the 3 sectors. Manufacturing, I just mentioned, the agenda that is there. Agriculture. Here's a country where 52% of our citizens are employed in an entity that contributes less than 20% of GDP. just shows you the very, very, very poor productivity we have in farms. And we also know, I mean, we can be on either side of the farm laws, but we also know that the real problem of the huge amount of rice and wheat that is produced in this country and so many other richer farm produce has been ignored, primarily because of policies and subsidies and so on and so forth. So that's a big area. Sadly, and Uma will talk about the need for feminine participation or female participation in the economy, the sad reality is that female participation actually dropped. I'm on the board of another NGO called Educate Girls, which works with tribal girls, putting them back into school in right from Rajasthan to Madhya Pradesh to Uttar Pradesh, now Bihar. As you know, all village children dropped out of school and had no access, as Dr. Marshall keeps saying, to technology. So there was a learning loss of 2 years for very large parts of this country. The real sad part is 70% of the girls who dropped out of school in COVID have not gone back to school. They're working in the farms. They're working at home as unpaid help. So it's extremely easy for the parent to say, oh, let her stay at home till she gets married. So these are real issues confronting the country in terms of agriculture. Services, we're all very proud of services, but we have this raging debate going on in NASSCOM circles and everywhere else that, what will Chat GPT do or generative AI do? You're smiling. Young people always say that this is what we always expected will happen. Now, honestly, if you ask me, I don't believe the world will die and go underground because of Chat GPT. But a lot of people think, oh my God, how will we compete, et cetera, et cetera. So services, when I was chairman of NASSCOM in 2008, as you know, was when the subprime crisis happened. And I remember making a presentation on Wall Street as chairman of NASSCOM. And they all asked me, how much will your industry decline this year? So it was the first time I thought, maybe will we actually decline? So I stuck my neck out and said, no, we normally grow 14 to 15%. This year is a tough year. We'll grow 4 to 5%, but we will grow. And we grew 4.8%. So I'm saying all this hype and negative hype keeps happening, but we still sustain ourselves. So we've written extensively about these 3 areas: agriculture, services, and manufacturing. Then we looked at the enablers and the possible challenges to the economy. One clear enabler is urbanization and reverse urbanization. There was a time when our industry was operating literally from 7 cities. Today, there are 75 cities who are all having a claim, including Ahmedabad, to doing good work in technology. So there is a fair amount of stuff happening. And with Digital India and the promise of 100 Mbps bandwidth in 250,000 gram panchayats, if not in all the 650,000 villages, you will see a good spread. So I think that's something that my principal co-author, Dr. Ijaz Ghani, who was working in the World Bank as a principal economist, so he's written about. The second is what Ravi Pandit has written about, which is mobility and sustainability. As all of us know, one good thing about COVID, if you can call it that, was there was a lot of work from home happening, and people have realized, including many multinational clients of India, that people can work from Ahmedabad or even anywhere in the country, so long as they have decent internet connectivity. So the need to clog the arteries of all the highways and roads and come to office, that's less. Of course, there's a flip side to it. I keep joking to my friends in Bangalore. I was doing this book talk in Bangalore International Center on a Wednesday evening, and to traverse 4 kilometers in Bangalore on Wednesday took me 1 hour, 45 minutes. So I said, what happened to? He said, no, everybody works from home throughout the week, but all companies want them to come to work on Wednesday. So that's Ashank, we must do this here. Why don't we tell the companies, for heaven's sake, stagger your date?
Stagger your date.
Why? They say, no, people, of course, will take Friday off. Not off, sorry. It's supposed to be work from home, okay? So we'll work from home on Friday. We'll work from home on Monday. That just needs Tuesday and Thursday. So might as well work on Wednesday. I mean, so these kind of convoluted logics are beginning to happen. So that's the second thing we wrote about. We've also written very extensively about the whole trust I talked about. And you must read that chapter because it's a very amazing chapter written by Dr. Kelkar and Dr. Ajay Shah. And they talk about it in a very nuanced fashion. That look, if there is not adequate trust between communities, between cultures, between the haves and the have-nots, inclusive India will not happen. So it's a good chapter that's been written. And finally, we've written extensively about skills, the work that I do a lot, and I think Uma also does a lot. And the lighthouses and multiple initiatives that are happening in the country are all trying to compensate for a generation which is not getting access to good aspiration, agency, and skills. So this is the broad canvas, and I will leave Dr. Mashalkar to talk about science, technology, and innovation, and Uma to talk about women participation. But one final point I want to make is that, I still remember, because it's a very popular book. And when we were finishing the book in October of last year, the publisher, like all publishers, suddenly woke up and said, oh, we need a foreword from a well-known person. So we said, when do we want the book? In 2 weeks, if we can get a good foreword, it's fine. So the only hope I had was to write to Mr. Narayan Murthy, our industry doyen, very good friend of Ashank and mine. And I wrote to Mr. Murthy and I asked him, Mr. Murthy, we need a forward. Mr. Murthy, in his usual initial said, no, I'm not available for the next 3 months. I'm traveling. If you want it in December, tell me. And he wrote it and copied the publisher. So my publisher, Rupa, immediately called me up and said, sir, we'll have to find somebody else. I said, I know, Mr. Murthy, give him time. So that night I get a call from Mr. Murthy saying, I'm sitting in the Charles de Gaulle airport in the Air France lounge. How many words do you want? I said, sir, it doesn't matter. 2 paragraphs is also enough. He said, no, I don't do 2 paragraphs. Do you want me to praise your book? I said, no, sir. Write whatever you want. So he said, okay, that's fine. So you'll get it in a month's time. So next morning, okay, literally 24 hours after the first request, I have this brilliant forward sitting in my inbox. And if you buy the book and read nothing else, I know people don't read full books unless your name is Neharika. Do read Mr. Narayan Murthy's forward on culture. Dr. Mashalkar will agree with me. It is one of the most brilliant book forwards you'll ever read. And read the first chapter because it pretty much summarizes everything else. And then dip into the other chapters. So I'm going to stop here. And should I give it back to you, Dr. Mashalkar? And give it to Dr. Mashalkar to. You want to make it?
All right, thank you. And as mentioned, that you would speak about the science and technology bit. I think that's an important piece in the book. So would request you to talk about it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, it's great to be back. I consider this as my institute. Have been here a number of times, have been on your board and has been a well-wisher and have been very, very proud of this great institution. Great to be back. Well, my own contribution has been in science, technology, and innovation. Science is the only thing that I've done in my life. So I have given my own perspective, view from my window, my own book of life, because all that I've done is science in this country. So science, I believe, must solve problems. Technology must transform. And innovation must impact, whether it is economic, whether it is social, and so on. They each have their own role. Then there is this issue about research and innovation. Research converts money into knowledge, and innovation converts knowledge into economic good and social good. We have been good at doing the first one, not so good at doing the second. All right. So how do you change that is something that we have talked about. We have looked back, as a matter of fact, because although we say, I only think of the future, that is where I'm going to spend the rest of my life, it is important to look back also, because that gives you a sense of pride, that tells you about what you have learned from the mistake that you have done, etc. So you will find some part of it actually looking back. I'm proud as a scientist. You know, people talk about 2020 as a year of pandemic. I talk about it as a year of Indian science. Because when the pandemic arrived, we did not have point of care diagnostics. We didn't have therapeutics. We didn't have vaccines. We had no idea about the biology of the virus. And it was Indian scientists who did all that. All right. For example, we take pride in the fact that we had 200 crore plus jabs. It was possible because not just because of Covishield, which was a licensed technology, but Covaxin, which is our own vaccine. Bharat Biotech, actually, I remember Bharat Biotech because Krishna Ella, you know, as he was growing, I was in Delhi and we have seen him grow as an entrepreneur and he did us proud. Therapeutics, for example, all our therapeutics are affordable excellence, very high quality, very affordable. And we not only satisfied our own needs, but the rest of the world. All right. There was this vaccine diplomacy, as people call it, but we did it for the good of the people, etc. So I think the main point I want to make is that Indian scientists delivered 2020, and we can see its impact. But we must also realize that that was possible because of years of investments. It didn't suddenly happen in a year. all right? It was decades of commitment by different political parties to sort of invest. And that investments must continue. Now, I'm going to come to that because I've been also critical, by the way, in this chapter, very frankly, about something that I'm not happy about, all right? And investment is one thing on which I'm not happy about, and I'll sort of come to that. If you see the way Indian science, technology, and innovation has grown, we have been a poor country. When I came back in 1976, we were something like $150 GDP per capita. We are now $2,000. And we all grew through that. All the science that we did at the time was scarcity. They say scarcity and aspiration is a deadly combination, basically. So that's what we did because we had a big aspiration. So that was one part, scarcity and therefore denial because you didn't have access. But also in strategic areas, there was no access. For love or for money, the technology was not available. Whether it was space, whether it was defense, whether it was atomic energy. I have a personal experience. I remember I've been a member of Science Advisory Committee to the Prime Minister for 30 years almost, starting with Rajiv Gandhi. And I remember Rajiv Gandhi asking us in the very first meeting, we are a poor country, but we must be good at something. What is it that we are good at? And Professor Rodam Narsiva was sitting next to me, said, we are good at this. What do you do with it? And that was the time the supercomputers were denied to us, all right? Because US was worried about Russia and the rest of it, access and so on and so forth. And parallel processing based architecture based high performance supercomputers were new. And the idea is always to start not where people are 50 years ahead, but where everybody's on equal footing. And that is where CDAC was created, Center for Development of Advanced Computation, $10 million, 3 years. And Vijay Bhatkar delivered it in less than $10 million in less than 3 years. Now, here is an interesting thing about denial-driven innovation. Dr. Kalam always used to say, you can go and extend your hand and say, shake hand. They will only shake hand looking at the strength in you all. And we saw that particular example because when we created Param 8000, then we created Param 10,000, and then we exported it to Russia. Then we ourselves had a control regime, by the way. We said we will not export or, and then what happened? The Cray, who had denied us the supercomputer, themselves came to set up a shop here, all right? So the chapter carries these stories as to how we were denied these technology and how we did it. Cryogenic engine denied. We said, thank you very much. We'll build our own. It had its own cost in terms of time, but in terms of benefit, it had. So therefore, when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, it is Atmanirbhar Bharat with Atmavishwas. That is basically the issue that I basically mentioned. The other points, of course, is I say, as far as India is concerned, you know, Atal Bihari Vajpayee used to say, India's future is in IT, IT as in information technology. I also used to say it is in IT, but IT as in Indian talent. According to me, this is our greatest competitive advantage, by the way. And that we have seen year after year in different fashions. And therefore, India has now become a global research and development platform. In a sense, there are more than 1,200 companies from around the world who have set up their R&D centers here. And I described this phenomenon, how it originated. What are the implications of this? The first is that many companies are creating as much as 1/3 of their IP here. That means Indian IP is generating IP for multinational companies. You can look at it as a sort of downside. But what happens is that among the 350,000 scientists, engineers, technology that we have, almost 25 to 30% of them have returned. So it is brain drain to brain gain, and then brain circulation, because they don't stay there. They bring those skills to other Indian enterprises. So this has been a phenomenal change as far as India is concerned. And you might say, why do they want to come here? The answer was given when the GE R&D Center was inaugurated. And I remember I was invited there because in some way, I was involved in getting their R&D center here because of what we did in NCL, licensing our technologies to them and so on and so forth. And I remember when he was asked, why are you here? He said, because I get the highest intellectual capital per dollar here. And you will find that in the book, I have done a detailed analysis in terms of our intellectual sort of output. And I've shown per dollar how, compared to UK, we deliver 4 times more, compared to China 5 times more, compared to Germany 8 times more, and compared to US 10 times more. I also look at it the other way around. I appeal to the government that don't think that because we are doing so much for so little money, give us even less money. Please don't do that. Because if you give more money, we'll be far more competitive. We'll be the leader in the world. So there are some strong messages there also. I like to end by just giving 5 quick points in terms of the suggestions that we have made as far as the future is concerned. I think the first is that we are celebrating India at 75, but not thinking of Bharat at 75. 70% of India lives in villages. 17%, and we should be ashamed, are still in slums. We have to think about them. So therefore, the inclusive innovation becomes very, very critical. And that inclusive innovation, I have my own sort of biases. I'm saying that making high technology work for the rich is very easy. Making low technology work for the poor is very easy. We must make high technology work for the poor. This is called affordable excellence. And the book is replete with such examples, because if you do excellence, the world will be your marketplace. And if you do it affordably, then India will benefit. And it is possible. In fact, I'll just carrying one example in my pocket. When you want to do ECG, what do? You go lie down, 12 lead, nurse comes, charges you 500 rupees or whatever, all right, and takes half an hour. How about a portable ECG, like I'm carrying here? This has been sold in Australia, in US, fully certified, gives you 12 lead ECG, and very simple. You put your 2 thumbs here for 15 seconds. There's a sensor. This is your heart, 15, 15, 15 seconds, 15, 15, 15 seconds. That's it. All right. And the ECG, if you have downloaded an app called Sanket, goes to the best expert that you have. Provided you are connected in a village, you can see how transformational it could be. Or there are some other examples. I will not go through the, but just give you a typical example of what we call as affordable excellence. You know, that is our specialty. That word can be. The second is taking risks, basically. All right. And their government becoming sort of a partner in that. It is very important. I remember creating a program called New Millennium Indian Technology Leadership Initiative. Talent, technology, and trust are the key fulcrums on which we have to base it. Private sector, all right. I remember creating a program where we give money to the private sector close to 0% interest in order to meet big targets. What is the impact today? Today we talk about climate change. We require fuel cells. We don't want to go begging with the rest of the world. Can you just imagine in 2002, we started work on fuel cells when nobody talked about hydrogen, nobody talked about fuel cells. And today we have our own KPIT technologies in partnership with National Chemical Laboratory and Sekri Karaikudi have created fuel cells which are ahead of the rest of the world. All right. For 1 kW, normally it is $1,000 to $1,200. This is just $400. And 95% of the components are it. But that was because at a time, because Indian industry had always looked at areas where markets were certain and technologies were certain. Technology was certain, so they could copy it, and markets were certain. Now we are, at that time we talked about technology were uncertain and markets were uncertain. Right? I think that's the second leap we need to take. The third one is entrepreneurship, the startup story that you sort of referred to. I'm delighted to see we are no more a starting up nation, we are a startup nation. And exponential is the key in that space, exponential inspirator, as I like to call it. 2016-17, we had 450 startups, today we are 90,000. But equally importantly, you know, you see the, until 2016-17, we had used to have 1 unicorn per year. Unicorn, as you know, is $1 billion market cap. In 2021, we had almost 1 unicorn per week. 42, not 52. but almost. And this has been because of the changes that one talked about. But there also, I have been a bit critical, as you can see, because only 4% of them are investing in deep tech. We need that, as a matter of fact. The fourth point is technology options I have referred to. Make is not the only technology option. Buy, make to buy better, buy to make better, and make it together. These are the 5 options. Buy, you can when you have dollars and people are prepared to give you. Not always, by the way. Make, we have done from pins to missiles. But make to buy better. When you do something like this great example that I gave, when you are on that particular path, you can shake hands. But buy to make better, I think, is a very important sort of option that we have to have. We have this New Energy Council of Reliance, which I chair. And as you know, Mukesh is investing billions of dollars. We had a meeting in Jamnagar just last week of the key experts, and many of the technology that we're having are buying to make better. We take it at TRL, technology readiness level 7, 8, etc., and better. And the last one is making it together. You know, public-private partnership, nimbly like, etc. And we have to choose one. And the last is, I think, we must regain the leadership. You know, we are ahead of China. We are ahead of China. In 1998, when we did the 10,000 gigaflops, we are ahead of China. Today, if you see the supercomputer list, out of top 500, 222 are from China, 4 are from India. They have gone ahead. In terms of patents, for example, 2003, I was the Director General of CSR at that time. We had got the patent culture. In the Asian list, CSR was number 1, LG was number 2, Samsung was number 3, and UI was number 4. Today, UI is not just Asia, but around the world, they are the biggest. So we have had this leadership and we have lost it. Actually, how do we sort of get that back? And that is where I'd like to end by what just now Ganesh mentioned about my book, Leapfrogging to Pole Vaulting. All right. Frog leaps because he's afraid of the predator and jumps a few feet. Pole vaulting is the size of the pole determines the size of your aspiration. And in that book, we show how India can actually sort of pole vault. So that's in sum the chapter. Thank you.
And yeah, no, that's all. Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Mashalkar, for your very interesting insights. I think the one on Atmavishwas is very important, you know, how much we believe in ourselves without having an irreality orientation it's, you know, both are important. However, I think one of the important facts you mentioned, Ganesh, in your introduction were the fact that India is possibly one of the only countries in the world where the women participation rates in workplace are going down. Everywhere else with more economic growth, the women participation rates go up. We are going down, and they're woefully low at this point of time. If we look at many of the world indexes of gender gap, women in the workplace, I think we are, you know, in very, very poor company. We're pretty much towards the end. And I think a country cannot grow without its women also having a place in the conversation. And I think that's what Uma has written about in her chat. Now, I know that's what she's written about. And I would invite Uma to now share her thing. Would be good.
Thank you, Professor Neharika. I was not originally part of the plan for being here, but some other work that we do near Ahmedabad brought me here. So I was delighted to be here, to be invited to be part of this session today. So I'm just going to keep my my session very brief so that we'll have more time for Q&A later. As was mentioned by Ganesh and by Professor Neharika, the chapter that I co-authored with Shilpa, this chapter focuses on what is the role women can play for India to become more successful and to be able to take advantage of a very vast population which is underutilized and which is facing several challenges on multiple fronts. It's a fact that some of us have been privileged to go to schools, to go to universities, to have the advantage of education in the cities. Just half an hour drive from any one of these cities, the situation is so very different when it comes to women. One of the reasons, as I said, I came here was to be with the villages outside of Ahmedabad, which was 2 hours driving distance from here. You would see a stark difference. So we'll not go into the statistics. Of the book talks a lot about where we stand and what is the kind of standing we have with respect to other countries in the world. And it is indeed shocking and disturbing that on the one hand, as the country is progressing, women's participation in the workforce is woefully low, and it is in fact dropping further. And there are many reasons for this. Once again, the book touches upon some of those. But what I would like to focus more upon is, so what do we do about this? I mean, it's a reality that even educated girls are unable to take advantage of the fact that there were toppers in the universities. There were the very few who got selected in the campuses with well-known, well-placed organizations, and still they give up their careers. Not to talk about women who could not even go beyond class 5 or class 6 in many of the villages even today. So if you really analyze, especially those women who are part of the informal sector, which is more than 90%, so fundamentally, there are 2 or 3 reasons because of which, to begin with, they do not even have access to education. And therefore, we would have to look at the way we formulate policies. Of course, right to education is a fantastic thing that has happened finally, which should have happened many, many years ago. But if we still look at the policies which have been framed to support women, whether it is for education or it is for workplace and so on and so forth, these policies are predominantly, what I would put it as, quote unquote, concession oriented. We need to do something for women. In a way, it is, these policies have been crafted to make sure that we do address the gender balance issue, and somewhere, somehow, the equation will work out. I mean, that's how, unfortunately, the policies have been implemented, while probably to begin with, that was not the beginning, the starting point. But if we were to really look at, despite the fact there are schools, despite the fact that there is free education available, why is it that we are not able to get more girls into schools? And Ganesh mentioned about educate girls. Why is it that many girls still do not make it to schools? You would find some fundamental things missing. I was referring to this village near Umred. Now, in that village, which has got some 2,000 families, there is only a primary school which caters to up to class 5. Beyond class 5, if anybody has to go to school, they need to travel approximately 6 kilometers. And in today's time and age, we would think, what is 6 kilometers? But from the village to the nearest road head, someone will have to walk at least 3 kilometers. So you can start imagining, the time it will take, the cost it will take, the access. So it's not just access to education, but the access in terms of the infrastructure. It is also the safety factor. My maid's daughter, come what may, any kind of argument will still not go down with my maid, simply because she said, look, I come to work from 10 to 6, I'm away from my home. And I shudder to think what will happen to my daughter, who's all alone at home after she comes back from school. So despite all kind of arguments, right when she finished her +2 and I'm at 10th standard, and she's a very bright girl, she was married. And this happens in the city of Pune, not very far from where we live. And this is happening right under our very presence. So what I'm trying to say is, in this chapter, we have talked about why it is important for us to relook at the policies from the lenses of women, from the perspective of safety, from the perspective of their own health, from the perspective of how does a community view and support them in terms of transportation and access and so on and so forth. When we start putting together all of these dimensions, when we start looking at the policy formulation from these dimensions, and together with that, we put a compulsory goal in front of us. Just like, for instance, we have said we need to go after Swachh Bharat. There is a maniacal focus on it. How do we bring about that maniacal focus about women, their safety, their education, their employability, their livelihood? That's the way we think policies will have to be relooked at. Second one is that of the digital literacy. We have spoken a lot about it, and we have experienced how digital literacy is actually transforming the women in terms of their confidence, their ability to take their life into their own hands, and how they are able to see black and white very, very clearly. From the most, you can say, simple example of how women are able to now have access to information and discover for themselves whether it is cheaper to buy from the next door shop or get from Amazon or Flipkart, to be able to decide for themselves whether I should get my daughter married into this family, because land records of the families are now available and accessible. And all of these have been possible because of digital literacy. And we got to do a lot more around these. Again, I would like to give an example where we are actually conducting digital literacy programs. In a class of, I did have an interaction this afternoon with about 40 kids, the boys and girls, and almost every second person said, what is it that you are studying, or what do you want to do? I'm learning Tally. And why are you learning Tally? I want to get some job. So it's a very, you can say directionally, they know they need to know something about digital, but how the digital literacy is really going to enable them to discover for themselves their talent and enable them to achieve their aspirations, we have a long way to go. Hence, counseling along with digital literacy will be crucial in the coming days. As much as we are doing counseling when they have reached colleges, or when we are doing skilling, we need to start that very, very early, particularly for girls. And last point this book has spoken about, amongst other things, which I want to touch upon briefly, is that of the need for changing mindset. And unless and until that is again addressed from the grassroots level, and we need many, many, many such NGOs like us and others, and I know Ashank also does a lot of work in terms of changing the mindset, we are not going to be able to see the transformation that we are all dreaming of. We are all very proud of the fact that we have village panchayats being, the members of the village panchayat being elected and women being village panchayat leaders. But I have seen and experienced for myself, in many of these village panchayats, the sarpanch is a woman, but the person who really runs the show is a male member in the family. And in fact, I was aghast when somebody I met recently, he said, I have studied MA, I have learned Hindi, I have learned Gujarati, I have learned Marathi, I'm proficient in Sanskrit, I have done B.Ed, and I have been a teacher. And by the way, my wife is a sarpanch. So I felt very thrilled that, look, at least finally we are hearing somebody who is so well educated and is supporting his wife to run the village. But the next sentence he spoke, so I said, so what do you do? I mean, you said you have been teacher all this while, and now that your wife has become a sarpanch, what do you do? Oh, I have given up my job. Ultimately, I have to run the show. So this is the sad state of affairs. And this is not an exception. This is happening in many of our village panchayats. Therefore, we got to really look at getting women to believe in themselves and getting women to have that confidence. Even today, in the villages, in front of the male members of their families, and even in the villages, women just do not even have the confidence to open up their minds and speak out their minds. So we have a lot of work to do, and that has to start with access to education, counseling, and a whole lot of other things. So the book has touched upon some of those, and there is a lot more to do and a lot more to say, which might probably be part of another book. Thank you very much, Neharika, for inviting me.
Thank you. And last but not the least, I'd like to invite Ashank for you to make some comments on your thoughts about the issue. And thank you, Uma, for sharing. And I think mindsets are the key.
Thanks, Neharika. I am not going to summarize or do anything like that for the book, because this all three authors may beat me up for doing a bad job at the end of it. So I don't want to take that risk. But I have to, of course, collect 10% from Ganesh. I had bought to buy that book at full price. I didn't know he was offering 10% discount, but that apart. But yeah, on a serious note, uh, I was really impressed the issues that this book covers from page 1 to page 240 or some which I read. Page to page in detail. Some of the authors, of course, are here and they did talk about it. Beyond them, of course, there are a lot of other issues that have been tackled very well. And I think as the wish of the book is, we would like to reach where they want us to reach. It is very nice to Ganesh talk about ICT from where he comes. Of course, science and technology, we have a guru here, great guru of the country and various other nations. And Uma comes from women. So I was just wearing a hat, little bit away from the book in the sense. I was saying, look, we are capable of achieving many of these. But if somebody had written a book in year 1900 in Argentina, I'm sure they would have said, we are already number 2 or 3 or 4 per capita, and we will rule and will become the largest, richest country. As an example, didn't happen. We have a whole example of Latin America, in fact, which was considered as most lucky country in the sense that in whole of 20th century, they didn't have to fight any wars of First World War, Second World War, no investment required. Everything was going very well. And still we see the difference, right? That's at one end. Same thing has happened to Africa in some form. And then we have another country north of us, which was well described by Dr. Mashelkar, where we were together and where we are now. And as Ganesh says that we will become number 3, but number 2 looks very far away. But maybe in 1990, that would not have been the case. So what's happening? Why some countries do well? Why some countries get stuck in what they call as middle country? What is it called? Middle country prison, or whatever. They get stuck, and we have seen those countries. They are in front of us. So I sometimes get scared, and I am not as optimist. He is always optimism, and wherever there is anything else, I go to him because then he boosts my motivation. So I can't match his optimism, but get very skeptical sometimes. What is that is missing? What is that we need to do better so that we don't get stuck? So I am fond of data. As Ganesh was saying, if somebody wanted data, there's a lot of it there. So if I look at data, you see there are countries who are autocratic and had done well. There are countries which are autocratic and have done miserably badly. There are countries which are democratic, which have done miserably badly. And there are countries which are democratic and are doing extremely well. So what is it? I don't know. Is the governance system naturally doesn't seem to be making a great difference at one level. One would conclude. Just the data. So if I look at that as an input, I come to a conclusion that there is something in the country and leadership and something together which probably has something to do with success. And I'm now talking of economic success, as Dr. Mashelkar says, unless we grow at double digit, there is no point. We can keep on talking. If we had grown at double digit in 1991 onwards, we would have been already number 3 maybe, and very close to number 2. So the point I'm making is everybody will say, no, social have to be seen. They have to be seen. But there is a strong correlation between economic growth and some of the social indicators. China is a good example. They have reduced the poverty of 800 million people. The largest poverty reduction in the world has happened because of one country. All other countries have reduced their poverty, but not China. Together has done more than others. So economic success matters. So I'm taking economic success as a limited indicator, but important indicator. So to my mind, I think three things that country should have, every citizen should have, and at one level, the rulers of the country should have, to my mind, if really all that which is described here has to happen. There are three V's actually, to my mind. I think, and some of it is going to what that nice foreword that my dear friend Narayan Murthy has written also to an extent. I think we need a vision, aspiration. Vision may be large word, but aspiration in every citizen of this country that they want to do well. Unless we have that, the energy won't flow through the system. We may have solutions available, but if energy doesn't flow, nothing will happen. One V. Second V I'm saying is values. And this is what the Mr. Narayan Murthy talks about in his foreword very nicely. I think unless we are driven by values of many things, which is keeping our word, following rule, following law, punctuality, we can all give a list. But I think unless, in fact, there is a study which says developing country and developed country, the difference is the 6 or 7 things. In fact, on a lighter side, I was advisor to one of these countries in Africa, and president of that country was to come and listen to me and my presentation along with his hundreds of people and ministers. And one of them was punctuality, and I have prepared all PowerPoint, and I go there to present at 10 o'clock. Mr. President is missing. He said he will be at least 1.5 hours late. So I said, boss, Abhi, if I present this PowerPoint, he may hang me. But the point I'm making is, someone came and said to me after that in my group, we were a group of 7-8 people from various countries. He says, Ashank, punctuality is very important. Your country is doing very well because Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister that time. He is always punctual, he said. And I can give you an example, he said. The point I'm making is values. The third point is vitality, energy to make things happen. It's just not energy. It is about thinking through it, building systems, thinking through very systematically about various issues, and be vitally alive and not be insensitive to anything in life. Now, if you have to build vision, values, and vitality in 1.4 billion people, I don't think we are going to succeed. But I think all of us carry that responsibility that we meet 10 people or 20 people. Can we sensitize them that your country depends on you, Mr. or Miss? Unless you show these three things, unless you take charge of your life, unless you take charge of your future, the country will not grow. So I think at some stage we need to take people, take charge of their life. I'll give you that example that Uma, you were talking. I do a program for girls leadership. We've done around 35,000, 40,000 girls now in Haryana, Mumbai. I tell you, girl which was not talking, which was not even always going down, after that program starts talking, and teachers say, what have you done? We have just built a confidence. We have just built a importance of having a vision and dream and values and so on. So we can change. We have so much of energy among women. I see it with my own eyes. Just change in 3 months or 6 months. In fact, in Haryana, the parents came and said, "Ye log kya kar rahe hain? Ladkiyon ko badha chada rahe hain. Ye program band karo." Because they start talking to parents saying, "Aap ye kyun kar rahe hain? I'm not going to get married." So the point I'm making is that one thing can change largely. So the point I'm making is we can do all this, but ultimately I think it is a leadership that can send that message. So our high leverage point is who are ruling the country. If we have right leadership which thinks through all this, it doesn't matter whether it is autocratic or democratic. That was the example I was giving you. If the rulers, if I may use the word, or politicians, or even executives carry right vision, values, vitality, it doesn't matter even if it is autocracy or democracy. The results will be very proportionate to those things. And that's why a country which is autocratic and doing extremely well, because they have created a freedom for certain activity, economic activity freedom, right? We did not create that for many years and see what are the results. But we created freedom in some other way of democracy and see the results. We are far ahead. The point I'm making is creating that freedom to have energy flow through the system is extremely important. And rulers have a high leverage to make it happen. So what role do you and I have? I think we have a role in democracy. We have to select the right people to go to parliament or Vidhan Sabha or even your municipal council. We have that role. I think we are responsible if 30% of people are supposed to be crime, whatever statistics that we have in Lok Sabha and so on. I think we are responsible. So can we change ourselves and elect the best people, irrespective to what party they belong to or whatever they do? I think what is important is to have a right person at the place where the rules are made, policies are made. If we do that, I think we are on the road to achieve that vision that they have well articulated and very well described. I think pathways they have described is brilliant. I think we need somebody who could make it happen. And we have capacity, but unless it flourishes in terms of flowering 1 million or 1 billion flowers, we may have an issue. Thanks.
Thank you. So we have run out of time, but we will have 2 questions maybe, and that will be a good starting point. Yeah, I can give you the mic. Faster.
Thank you.
Good
evening and welcome to our IIMA campus. It's a pleasure to see many of the luminaries we have dreamt to see. So Professor Mashelkar, I used to read your books when I was doing my engineering. To see you in person is like I'm getting goosebumps. Anyway, so I have 2 questions, in fact, for Professor Mashelkar. I'll read out the role of technology/digital in the era of a Cold War we are heading towards. I mean, it's not going to be the same Cold War which we saw in 60s, 70s, and 80s, but it's going to be a different Cold War. So the role of technology, digital on the Cold War. And second question that I have in mind is the role of private sectors in space technologies. Because that's definitely is achievable, and that is where we need focus for the next 25 years. So these are my 2 questions to Professor Marshall.
Mike is there.
I have it. Yeah, I have it. Thank you. I think both are very, very pertinent questions indeed. Very frankly, I was speaking somewhere and I said, the new norm is VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. You can see that, whether it was COVID, whether it is conflict, whether it is climate, and so on and so forth. These are actually going to generate. So the old definition of Cold Wars are out, as a matter of fact. Secondly, technology will play a critical role. Digital technology is an equalizer as well as one who can create dramatic inequalities. And that's the good news for India. In a sense, not only digital India is happening, like he gave the example, but also digital India is becoming very sort of powerful in terms of leading the world. You know, I mean, when we talk about Covaxin, the role that the software played, you know, is not normally recognized, but now around 42 countries are sort of trying to sort of access that. So my view is that resilience is going to be the key. All right. And the resilience will have several tenets, which is adaptability, agility, innovative thinking, autonomous innovation, and so on and so forth. So I think we have to anticipate that the new norms are going to be the ones which will based on these sort of uncertainties. Because after, let's say, Ukraine, Taiwan happens, what will you do? When we talked about 3 Cs, and he was there, Ganesh was there, I talked about 3 Cs as COVID, conflict, and climate. Somebody said, no, there is a 4th C, chips. And you understand the importance. In fact, we had a session on semiconductor supply chains, and that breaks down, you can see. So the forms of these are going to be very different, and we have to be basically prepared for that. That's the first. Your second question was?
Space.
No, huge. In fact, not just space. I want role of private sector in everything, to be honest. You know, what is happening is that space is, of course, opening up to private sector now. And in fact, I've written about it about 2 years ago or so, but even other sectors that is opening up. For example, nuclear energy. We always thought that it is the domain of the government. All right, Nuclear Power Corporation will do everything and so on and so forth. For the first time, you saw they opened it up to public sector, and 5 new units are coming. But private sector is deeply interested, because with the small modular nuclear reactors, the game is changing completely. Because intermittency is what one doesn't want. That is the problem. With solar, you can do. Wind, you can do. But there is an intermittency. So we require sources which are not intermittent and yet cost. The only thing is about safety. But it has not opened up for us. I'm going beyond your space. I'm saying currently there is an interest by private sector. I know that, because just day before yesterday, I've talked about our current policies are, it can be done only in partnership with the government, and government being the major stakeholder. Now the companies don't want that. Companies don't want the government to sort of rule that. So I too have to open up my mind. And the last point, which I did not make, is private sector participation in terms of research and development. You know, the great tragedy of India is the following. 1998, our investment in research and development percentage of GDP was 0.7%, 1998. Today, it is 0.7%. China, 2.4%, 3 times higher, but their GDP is 5 times more. So you can see the kind of investment. It is not that the political wish is missing, by the way, because nowadays it is very fashionable. Congress did this, BJP did this. Let me give an example before I close. 1989, I remember the last meeting we had with Rajiv Gandhi, 7 Racecourse Road. He said we must move from 0.7% to 2%. Okay? And TN Session was cabinet secretary. He suddenly said, hey, sir, we don't have money. He says, I will set aside 2%. And the rest of the country can have. Congress, right? Then comes BJP. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, 2000, Indian Science Congress, Pune. I was the president. I remember his speech, he said 2%. Then Congress, 2011, Dr. Manmohan Singh, Shillong, Indian Science Congress, he said 2%. And finally, 2015, our current Prime Minister said 2%. We have remained steadfast at 8.7. And one of the reasons is that 2/3 of it comes from the government. 70%, 30% come from industry. Okay. All the ratios that I talk about, including in China, are the other way around. 70% from industry. So it is not just industry participating in space, industry participating in everything, but industry investing in research, development, and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for another question? One more? One more question, if anyone has? De do aap mic.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for coming and sharing your knowledge to us. This is Bhavin here. Actually, I come from engineering background. I did my project in R&D in 2013 with Force Motors. At that time, I had a vision to go deep into R&D before starting the project. After ending the project, I had made some perceptions, maybe right or wrong, I don't know. But then I decided to move on to, like say, get in touch with the market. So cut short the question is that recently I started my further education with IIM Ahmedabad. So we remain confused sometimes to go dive into depth into technology side or management side or how to balance that, and because we have limited time and so that's the main question.
Mike.
No, I think we all agreed that, there is no escaping technology. It is a technology defined world. So there's no question of technology or management. The advantage of going deeper into management, I was discussing with Professor just before we started, is that today, the old styles of management don't work either. Because I was just to give you an example, we every year PIC hosts the Asia Economic Dialogue. And I was in a 1-hour discussion with Mr. Narayan Murthy, who was nice enough to come to Pune for that. And we had this 1-hour discussion, but of course, social media only picks up one little chat that we had. But I asked him, what is the role of management in the current state of people? And his point was very clear. That is Mr. Narayan Murthy. He said, look, no country was ever built without hard work and discipline by people. Okay, that's point number one. And of course, to provoke him, I asked about this great phenomenon called moonlighting, when people are doing multiple jobs. And he said, that is completely wrong. And I want people to come to work. So this social media thing picked up this 1.5-minute chat between me and him. And I also give some very nasty examples of what I've seen young people do. And you should see, next day, 67,000 downloads, 285 comments, out of which 284 say these two old men should die immediately so the young people can take over the planet. How do you manage in such situations? Okay, so I'm only asking you a question to answer your question. These are very different times. So I think new ideas of management must also emerge, but not at the cost of technology, to answer your question.
I agree, of course, given where we are today with what Ganesh has said. I will only add one more thing. Before you plunge into it, first find whether you really love to be what you want to do. I think half the time or 90% of time we choose area because a parent want or something we think we should do because it will give us success. But if you do not have a passion for what you want to do, study what you may, do what you may, nothing will succeed. I can tell you, as much as something if you have passion about it. So find out what makes you love that particular area, whatever it is. Of course, you should also have a strength matching it. You may love to climb Himalayas, but you may not have strength. But those are okay at one level. But what I'm saying is, these two things, if they are there together, you are on the way, I'm saying. Thanks.
All right.
I'll just add one line for you. Enjoy what you do and do what you enjoy. The moment you stop one of these, change. As simple. One line.
Thank you. So I know you all have flights to catch. So we will close this session. I would like to thank each one of you personally for doing this, and on behalf of the Institute as well for making the effort to come and speak to us. I wish we had a bigger group of people in front of you. It's just a very down time for the Institute because we're closing for summer mostly. I think there are some people online, would like to thank them as well. And I think none, they're all off. Yeah. PGP, PGPX, PGPA, DBA. No, gone. The new ones are still to come. So also like to thank the library, Dr. Chan, Reena for doing this. Thank Mr. Piyush for also chipping in and making this happen. And thank each one of you for coming and making this a wonderful session. Thank you. Thank you.